So here I am with the opportunity, as Kirk and Sandy are off on well-earned vacation, to share some thoughts on everyday faith with you. And the key into that was some beautiful music by Tony Clark Gretchen and the gift of Eric Ruskin at the keyboards that was actually coordinated in with this. But before diving right into the talk, I would just tell you that while in the past I've done some science as part of my talk, I'm not going to do that so much today, but I did bring an experiment from science that I'll do at the very end before the prayer wall, and that's why the bag. You know, there may be rumors out there, some of you may have seen it and said, oh look, Reverend John is like consorted with Spirit and is bringing hope. It's a science experiment. So what about this faith? Is the faith that we have, is it something that's just in us, or to some extent is it like a skill? And I was thinking about, does faith require a skill? I was remembering all of the practitioners. I've been a practitioner for a long time, to where they finally said, enough with this, you're practitioner emeritus, which is an old practitioner or something. And that requires a license, and I even thought about bringing my license, but that was just, who needs that license, right? But is that relevant to faith? Does a practitioner have a more significant faith? Or then I was called to go to ministerial school, and then I learned that to become a reverend, you have to have a license, and in our faith, actually, you get a beginner's permit with training wheels for 3 years, and then you can get ordained and actually get the real license. I haven't actually seen that yet. I'm not at that level of the mystery to know what that license looks like, but I think it's probably similar in what you do in the outside world. And I was also thinking about other places where there's example of licenses. And some of you have heard me speak about aviation and flight before, and I know very well that there's licenses in aviation, and they're important. I once had a student pilot license. Any of you ever have a student pilot license out there? Yeah, there's a few. So I had a student pilot license, and I didn't actually get the official private pilot ticket, and my life changed, and I went on and did other things. And I also certainly know that licenses can be important, that level of skill and competency. For example, if you were to board the airplane to fly on vacation to Hawaii, and they were to say, student pilot Eric, who aced his multiple choice exam, will be flying us to Honolulu today. Whoa! That might not be the most reassuring message to launch off and start the vacation. You might rather prefer, Captain Eric, who has been flying these big silver birds for years. And maybe before that was taking off and landing on aircraft carriers, so we'll trust him to find Honolulu and get the airplane down on solid ground. So when you think about faith, what is that? What is the character of our everyday faith? And today we do have our Prayer Wall Sunday, which is a tradition at InSpirit and some other centers for spiritual living. And I would ask that as that comes up towards the end of my talk, that you be thinking about, what is your request? What does Spirit call to the faith in you that you might want to boost and amplify today? And I would ask whether you come up and choose to use a practitioner or minister to boost and accelerate the topic of your faith, or whether you choose to sit in the audience and just interact with that yourself in your own heart and your own mind, that you be thoughtful of what that might be. And as I go through the talk, I'm going to say a little bit about that. But first, I wanted to share a little bit of wisdom that comes from Rumi, who, you talk about license. Rumi has poetic license. Listen to this. I have been a seeker, and I still am, but I stopped asking the books and the stars. I started listening to the teaching of my soul. So as I listen to Rumi in the voice of a prophet and a poet like that, it strikes to me that everyday faith is truly something deep and powerful that originates within our soul, who we are. It's the way the infinite divine talks to each of us, and through us has a special message, a special passion, a special calling. Maybe it would be useful to say this. I mean, is there like a license that anybody has to go out in the world to be a peacemaker? Does anyone have a license in their wallet to be a peacemaker? I don't think so. But is there anyone out there that's ever felt called to be a peacemaker? If in your family or in the community you've ever felt called to be a peacemaker, wave back, let me know. I mean, so a lot of us have that. So imagine that. There's this one spirit out there. We are all human individual manifestations, and some of us are called to be peacemakers. And I know that in the Catholic faith, they got the guy Francis, right, the Pope fellow, and he's called to be a peacemaker. And sometimes I've wondered, whether that's a terribly lonely job, being the head of, let's say, the Catholic Church or the head of the CSLs. And I actually think in a faith like this, where so many faces smile and so many hands wave, when I ask who has ever felt a divine call to be a peacemaker, that's really a signal to what a special and wonderful faith and what a special and wonderful community that we have here. It's very unique and it's very special. And even though you could go to Reverend Kirk's class on treatment and meditation, and I do believe it's not too late, if that in any way calls to you and you want to focus on one of our expressions of faith in Science of Mind, treatment, have at it. Show up. And don't worry that there's going to be too many people and there won't be enough seats. Make him open a second section. If that energy and effort at strengthening your spiritual muscle calls to you, go for it. On the other hand, if you get up tomorrow or you walk up to the prayer wall and you have some point about being a peacemaker in a more peaceful world, pray it. Pray it, because we all have it within us. So, again, I'm kind of back and forth here. Is there a license or is there not a license? I've got a different example that's poignant to me, and I don't know. Well, at the end, everyone will make their own decision. I mean, what we do here in Science of Mind is we talk about spirituality, faith, science, religious traditions, and everything. And at the end, typically, the ask is, what's your decision? What does Spirit in your heart say is your truth? And how can we help you live in that? I think this is the place where people tend to show up if their mission and purpose is to live in their truth. Because I've never been in a community, any kind of a community, that's more about that. And it means everything to me. That's why it was worth it to go through all the effort to get training wheels as a junior minister, right? So think about this. I do some stuff in healthcare. Some of you people may know that I go out there in healthcare and I mess around and do things. So in healthcare, there's a lot of licensed roles. To be an aide in healthcare, there's a certificate typically required. To get in and be a nurse, there's levels of nursing, licenses, registrations. What about to be a physician? There's general physicians and then there's surgeons. And there's boards for all of this stuff. If one wants to go out in behavioral and developmental, there's psychologists and there's various credentialed counselors and there's various kinds of therapists, and then there's alternative healers. There's all of that. And then there's people that are like the specialists, and then there's the subspecialists. I do stuff with a fellow whose credential in healthcare is he's a pediatric pulmonologist. So that says for the newborns and the littlest young ones, for those who have problems breathing and getting enough oxygen into their body to make it, he's all about that. Now, there's not many of them, but in his specialty, when a child is not thriving, they've got a blue baby and people can't solve it, Dr. Steve, he gets the call, and he'll make a miracle, and he's got the delight of so many families where he's the guy. He showed up, they solved the problem, and they've got a thriving teenager, someone who's grown up and become an adult, or just simply a baby that's crawling and able to say goo-goo versus a sad outcome. So, licenses like that are important. And there's a concept that comes out of healthcare that I'd like to bring back, And then I'd like us to just look at, if we bring that concept back, how does that fit with the idea, or maybe it doesn't, I think it might fit, the idea that the spiritual license that we have, or the spiritual power or authority that we have individually is big. So in healthcare, what they'll talk about when they look at, is the hospital working well? Is the healthcare system working well? They'll look at something like, are the people with licenses and certificates practicing at the top of their license? They'll be looking at, if you have a pediatric pulmonologist in the community, when we need one, is he doing that? Because when the pediatric pulmonologist is saving a blue baby, that's the top of the license. Or you might have a surgeon, and the surgeon might be qualified to sew up where someone was an idiot. I wasn't an idiot. I did an idiotic thing. I ripped a spot on my leg and it needed to be sewn up. So a general surgeon can sew that back up. Or if it's on the face, a plastic surgeon, like that. You get what I'm saying. So there's a focus in healthcare on how can we get people to the top of their license. And there's a lot of good results that show if you can get the patients access to the right people so that people are working at the top of their license, it all works better. So now let's step away from healthcare and let's come over to everyday faith. Do we work at the top of our license? If Spirit gave me and you an unlimited spiritual license to pray and act on all the goodness that we have in our hearts, are we living at the top of that license? Or is it a situation that you've heard about in healthcare where someone needs help and it's not in anybody's license to do it? My nephew was in the military and he told me about a fellow who had an accident, like oops, 2 fingers got crunched and they needed a hand surgeon. And it was a big problem transporting someone all over the place, trying to find a doctor who would say, it's within my license, I can fix it. When's the last time you saw something in your family, down the street, at work, or in the world that seemed too big? But again, what's the nature of your spiritual license? Was there something to do? Was there a friendly word to give? Was there a prayer to say to yourself or to share with someone else? Were you practicing at the top of your license? And what could I possibly say today that might shift your perspective to help you remember the next time something comes up, whap, that seems out of bounds, to dig deep, to know that that spirit, that soul that Rumi speaks about is within you, that it is the source of answers, and that typically there is something faithful and prudent to do. Because I think we have that kind of a license, and I believe that that's why we all come back here, because that notion of building spiritual community, of being the force that makes the difference and finding places where we can go out and impact the direction of tomorrow is doable, it's within our scope, and oh so very important. Let's go back and take a different look at it. In the Bible, in John, chapter 15, we read, "If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you." So to me, that's very encouraging, but it also, when I hear in the Bible, it shall be done unto me, I understand it shall be done unto my experience of the world around me. That means that if my prayer is for someone to have healing from a disease or an injury, my experience will be about knowing their healing. And that will also flow in their life to the extent that they're open to all the good that one's spirit shows up and brings. So what did Ernest Holmes write in The Science of Mind as he was teaching about that particular verse in John? It amazes me to just, he was way back there before we have all that we know today about things, and he was able to write this. Our prayers to the one will be answered. But let us remember that prayer is answered according to the law. And this law is one of liberty and never one of license. A law of liberty and never one of license. So I read that, and I'll tell you quite candidly, as I prepared for this, I figured, well, there's probably about 2 hours of cool stuff to say about that alone, but it wouldn't fit on a Sunday morning. Probably people would need a health break and a nutrition break before we could get through all of that. So let's just focus on the essence of it. It's not a law of license. And it's not like you've got some grant and either it expires and you didn't renew your spiritual license, or there was a scope limitation, where you're not allowed to pray for people in Africa, or politicians are exempt from getting benefit from our prayer, that in their pledge, in quest to do better, that we could pray for success in the political domain, for goodness sakes, or for people that show up as irritations in our life. Does my spiritual license exempt me from effectiveness and exempt them from benefit? If I hold in my heart that a solution will emerge that can accommodate the needs of all people gracefully. So it's one of liberty. We've got unlimited, we've got liberty, we can show up, we can apply it however we will. So I actually think that time and again, you look at Ernest Holmes and there's all this genius packed into a sentence. And he's done enough of it that it fills an entire book, and it takes us a bunch of courses just to walk through and have a first dip at it. But it's not necessarily Ernest Holmes. What that is, it's a statement about the goodness and depth of truth and spirit and wisdom, of the heritage that we all share as people of faith. That's what it's about. It's not about them or him or anything like that. So, in a little bit, we're coming closer to it. We'll be at that point where we have the prayer wall, and I'd ask you, before I do the science experiment, to just start thinking about when you come up for the prayer wall. And now that we've paused and realized that we're not on some limited scope with our spirituality, it's the unlimited first-class license to treat, pray, and love for everything, anything, for all of it. Think about coming up and just stretching the limits of what you might have thought before, and have a big request, or just sit in your chair when we get to that moment and activate that loving heart in you that knows the goodness that you imagine for the world around you, for your loved ones, for the people you care about, for the people that show up and seem obnoxious and wasteful, that we'd like to find a way to practice better together, whatever it might be. So, the science experiment. Carry it in a bag of hope. It's probably symbolic. I first got into biology when I was a college student, and I was sitting on a carpet in the professor's house, and they actually had a class that the classroom was the living room of the professor's house, and you'd sit on the carpet. It was pretty cool. The teacher was Max Delbruck, Nobel laureate, hey. And he started out in physics. He crossed over to biology, and they didn't send him home. And downstream from that, a lot of stuff got figured out, like Watson and Crick figured out the genome, and all kinds of amazing things that have flowed from that, which is not today's topic. Today's topic is everyday faith. So I was wondering, if we did have a spiritual license, which I've kind of said I don't think it's a license. I think we have like a grant of unlimited power. But if it was a license, where would it be, right? If we had a spiritual license, we look in our wallet. No, that's a license to drive a car. Would we find that divine, unlimited spiritual license in our wallet? No, probably not. So then there's this stuff in the body that sometimes you might have heard about, these genes that power the template for the cells to know to make brains and hearts and muscles and skin, right? And genes. And they talk about genetic engineering and some genetic methods to solve cancer where they're making progress. Solve Alzheimer's, people are making progress. So I was thinking maybe our spiritual license is in our genes. And I thought I would take the bold step of bringing mine today, and we could together look and see if the spiritual license is in anyone. Now, when you go home, you can check. But there's my genes, and I was thinking, I don't know. Whoop, excuse me. Is my spiritual license, is it possibly in my genes? Holy smoke, a spiritual license for unlimited healing. Now, so maybe I don't need my genes to have a spiritual license, but maybe my genes create the human that receives the communion with Spirit and being a human expression of that infinite one Spirit that gives me access to unlimited healing. Wow. And then I kept digging. I find stuff in my genes. Ha! A spiritual license for unlimited bounty. And notice that the spiritual license wasn't for $1. When we create money, we put a limit on it. What does Spirit give you? Unlimited bounty. What else? Oh my goodness, there's more. I have a spiritual license for unlimited love. I don't get like 1 month, 1 week, 1 year, or even 1 lifetime. It's unlimited. And I pause and I think about that. Could that possibly be so, that I have access to unlimited love? Well, my parents have gone on before, and I still love them, and I still feel them loving me. I think it could be true. Wow. This is amazing. Maybe we need to do a biology lecture or class or something sometime. And then I was wondering about those people that vex me, or if I look at the news and I'm thinking, the news is a waste, I'm not liking to watch this. What could I feel for the stuff and the people and the events? And then I notice I've got one for unlimited compassion too. How about that? How about that? And that's just a quick 2-minute exploration into what might be in the genes. So, saying that, I would just ask you to, in this moment, as I ask the ministers and the practitioners to come forward and form up for the prayer wall, please, just come on up now, that the rest of you be just imagining, understanding the truth of your license, which is really, it's an unlimited grant of Spirit for everything, a capacity for all works, all purposes, all needs that are out there in the world. What would you ask that we could boost with a quick word for you today? And even know if you don't come forward, that we all stand with you knowing that the unlimited power of Spirit to understand what's next, to hold in your heart the good for all, that we know that it's your power as much as it's anyone's power, and we're with you in that. So please, I would ask that you come forward if you'd like a word from a trained partner in this. I declare that all of these requests are lifted in Spirit and they're fulfilled because it's the way Spirit works. We ask, it's demonstrated, and that cycle is activated strongly here today. And as we complete this prayer wall, I turn this over to our musical angels to lift our hearts always to a better place, and so it is.